What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to another Fantasy Puck video. It's Chris, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys my top 20 wingers in tiers. Before you guys start peeking at players and everything like that, let's get right into the video. Guys, let's get right into the video. Pretty much the exact same thing that Mike did in the last video where he had his top 20 overall players going towards next season. I'm going to do the exact same thing. These are not based off of like Yahoo rankings or ESPN rankings or anything like that. These are my own personal opinions. So please keep that in mind. We're going to do the exact same kind of format that Mike had as well. Standard Yahoo scoring, but no plus minus, and we're going to be doing hits instead. So let's get right into the video. I'm actually not going to let you guys see the players, which I think will add a little bit of suspense to the video as well too, so hopefully you guys like that. All right, so starting things off, guys, in the S tier, I'm going to have Mitch Marner and William Nylander. These are the best wingers in the National Hockey League for a bunch of reasons. I'm totally kidding, guys. I'm joking. I know Mike loves to rip me for being a Leafs fan, saying like, oh, I'd take Matthews at 1 over McDavid, and so I'm going to let Mike get his free licks in there. That's fine. It's tough to kind of chirp him back because he's one of those guys that like doesn't cheer for an actual team, so he can get his free licks in there with me. But in all seriousness, let's start things off with Mikko Rantanen at the #1 spot, and this might be a little bit of a surprise to you guys, but Rantanen, you know, is just so solid as a player. One of 3 players on this list to be on pace for over 100 points in both the past seasons, especially with like, I think Landeskog being out, he's really stepped up as one of the main play drivers, him, McKinnon, Makar. He just plays a ton of minutes now. He got an increase in average time on ice last season, playing over 22 minutes, just as good of a goal scorer as a playmaker. And now with over 300 shots, plays all over, plays with McKinnon, plays on his own line sometimes. It doesn't matter where you put him, guys. This guy's a lock, and I think he's got another 100-point season in him. All right, moving on to #2, guys. I have David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins. It feels almost criminal putting him here after a 60-goal year with 407 shots. Guys, I don't even remember the last time somebody had over 400 shots. It must have been like Ovi in like the mid-2000s or something, but like what a season for Pasta. The thing with Pasta is like you have to realize that like Boston, we just don't know what's happening with this team, right? Like they lost both their top 6 centermen, which doesn't really help, although he did play with Krejci and Zaka, who's likely going to be his centerman this year for the majority of last season. Like he wasn't even paired with Marchand. Marchand primarily played with Bergeron. I do think he still has that potential for 50 goals. I think like he's just that good of a goal scorer, and then an insane shot volume should happen as well this year, guys. He's going to be looked upon as the main driver of play now in Boston, if he wasn't already. I am a little bit hesitant of him hitting over 100 points again, but the potential for goals and shot volume is just insane. Also really good on the power play as well too, guys, so that's why I have him at 2 behind Rantanen. At #3, guys, I have Matthew Tkachuk, and this is probably the player that will slide or increase the most. I think if he was playing a full season, I would have him as the #1 winger, but just we don't know so much about his injury to rate him properly just yet. I'm putting him here at 3 just out of respect for what he's done over the past 2 years, both over 100-point seasons. He's also got an insane durability to him as well, guys. He's only missed 3 games over the last 4 seasons, and then you add again a crazy high shot volume last year as well too. He's pretty much a lock for this stat line if he was going into next season fully healthy. I'm praying that he falls in drafts and it ends up that his injury isn't as significant as people thought, or you see something similar to what happened last year with, say, McAvoy and Marchand with the Bruins, where they just got back a lot earlier than people initially anticipated. He actually doesn't hit as much as the name would tell you, but I think just having him at 3 out of respect and not knowing so much information on his injury, I think 3 is a pretty good rating. Like I said, I'm praying that he falls in drafts to me. I'm praying that people are hesitant about him, but he is just such a stud when it comes to his stat line, guys. That's why I have him at #3. At #4, guys, we have the unicorn himself, Brady Tkachuk. He's even more valuable now than he was last season, which is insane to say. Mike was saying how he was looking at some tweets saying that, like, gone are the days of being able to get Brady in the 2nd round. I don't think he quite has the ceiling as the rest of the players in S tier, but his floor is insane. 350 shots, 240 hits last season. I think that makes him a late 1st-round player. You can pair him with any other winger. He's also crazy durable, just like his brother. I will draft this guy every single chance I get, and he's deserving of being in the S tier. Up next, guys, still in the S tier, I have Jason Robertson of the Dallas Stars. probably the safest pick in this tier. He's one of the best goal scorers in the National Hockey League. He's so safe with the line that he plays on, with Roope Hintz now being more established as an elite centerman, and he's got Joe Pavelski. If you look at his playoffs, he doesn't seem to be slowing down either. Plus 40 goal seasons in both of the past 2 seasons with 313 shots last year. So you know, like, that insane kind of shot volume is coming for J-Rob. But don't let his floor just take away from his ceiling. I think he's got 50 goal upside. I think he hits another 100 points this year if he stays healthy, which, you know, talk about durability. He's only missed 12 games in the past 3 seasons as well too. I think he's a great pick, a very, very safe pick in the first round, and that's what you want with your first 2 picks. You want safety and security and know what you're getting, and J-Rob is just an absolute stud. Rounding out the S tier list, we have Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild. Was scoring at a 48-goal, 92-point pace last season before he got injured. He had 40 goals in 67 games, which sounds insane. I think he's got legitimate 50-goal upside and 100-point upside this year. He should have around 300 shots as well too, as he was on pace for over that, again, before he got injured last season. He is the main driver of the offense, like Mike was talking about in the last video, for the Minnesota Wild, and adding Matt Boldy into that mix, I don't know how. Hopefully it boosts his numbers as opposed to potentially take away from some of his goal scoring, but I love being able to pair him as well as some of the other elite wingers in this tier. Depending on like where your pick is in this draft, you can get him even in the second round too sometimes, depending on where people take goalies and depending on where people take Makar. You can even pair him with Makar in some drafts, but I think Kaprizov is, again, a legitimate 50-goal upside player with 100-point upside as well too, and again, a really, really high shot volume. This will be the pick that I get the most kind of gripe around. Mike had him really high in his top 20. I have Nikita Kucherov in the A tier, and I'll explain why I kept him out of the S tier. Number one, I think the difference between Kucherov and the guys in S tier is just shot volume. He won't hit over that 300 threshold like everybody in the S tier would if they were playing a full season. I think he's a little bit more risky than the guys in S tier just because of his injury history. The 82-game, 113-point season was great, but that's the caveat, right? Like, he actually played a full 82 games, where previously in the past 2 years prior to that, he only had a total of 47 games. He's also getting up there in age. He's hitting 30 this year. I think, again, he's a great option. He's falling in drafts. I would not blame you at all if you took him in the first round. I just think he's a tier below the guys above him because of the lack of shot volume and the fact that he's not, again, an elite goal scorer like the guys in S tier as well. Only one time he's hit over 40 goals in a season. The last 2 seasons, 25 goals, 30 goals. So I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of put him in the same tier as the guys in S tier. For my next player in the A tier, guys, is Mitch Marner. And again, I think Marner just gets a bad rep because of the fact that people think that he doesn't score as many goals. And over the past 2 seasons that both Kucherov and Marner have played, they have the exact same goals per game rate at 0.42. And the biggest thing with Marner is he's a very, very, very safe pick. He doesn't have elite goal upside. He doesn't have an entire, like, a really high shot volume like the guys in S tier. And Kucherov likely outshoots him in the majority of seasons. But the biggest thing with Marner is he is one of 4 players in the past 2 years to score 95 points in each season. His floor is really, really high when it comes to his point total. The thing that doesn't allow me to put Marner above, say, a guy like Kucherov is just the shot volume, as well as the fact that Kucherov, you know, like I said, he has that upside of getting like 110, 120 points if he's healthy. But Mitch, you know, is a very, very safe player, and that's what you want in your first 2 rounds. He's a lock for 95 points. I'm totally okay with putting him here. Up next, guys, we have Timo Meier, and there's only 2 players in the National Hockey League over the past 2 seasons that have had over 300 shots, 40 goals, and 150 hits, and those 2 are Timo Meier and Alex Ovechkin. And I know that a lot of people will take Ovi here. I think Meier is just in a better position for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think him playing it in New Jersey now opens up a whole bunch of more opportunity for him to essentially exceed that 40 goal mark. And I think just with Ovi, he's kind of, you know, declined a little bit in terms of his age. I don't think his point totals are going to be as high as, say, Myers would be, just given the fact that he's now in New Jersey and he's still in his prime. So that's for the reason I have Meier over Ovechkin here, who does come in in at the next pick, guys. The lock for 40 goals every single year, kind of like what I said. He'll still get you a really high shot total. He'll still get you a really high hit total, but I do feel like, you know, he's 37 now, and eventually his production is going to have to slow a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be in the goal scoring department, but I do think that, you know, expect him to be in that like 70, 75, even maybe 80 point range if he has a really good season in terms of his playmaking. I just prefer having Meier over him slightly, just for the fact that, you know, one is 37 and the other one is in his prime, playing on what should be one of the best offenses in the National Hockey League in New Jersey. Finishing up our A tier, we have Artemi Panarin. He was kind of a hard guy to put here as well too, given the past 2 seasons he's been around that 95 point range. You compare him to a guy like Marner because they kind of have similar attributes to him, but Marner's actually had 39 more shots in the past 2 years than Panarin has, so he gets a slight edge in terms of his shot volume. And with Panarin, guys, I feel like he's 31 years old, going to be 32. I think he's kind of peaked in terms of his fantasy ceiling, where I feel like Marner could hit over that 100-point range, especially playing with a guy like Auston Matthews. I'm not saying Panarin couldn't do that. I just think it's less likely. As well as you look at the goal totals too, Marner had 32 in the year before and 30 last year. Panarin had 22 in the year before and 29 this year, so he does have a slight hit in goal scoring as well too, guys. Still has a really high floor. I think he'll be around that 85, 90 point again if he can stay healthy, but I feel like he's kind of peaked in terms of his ceiling, so expect him to be in that range. Good on the power play as well too, guys. Just like everybody else in the A tier, I just feel like he's kind of a step below the guys ahead of him in terms of his shot volume and in terms of his goal scoring. Starting off our B tier, we have William Nylander, and going forward, this is kind of going to be the players that are around a point a game, the guys that can't really hit towards that 100-point echelon. But the thing I really like about William Nylander is the fact that he has an insane shot volume. He's been a lock for over 250 shots the past 2 years. He hit 293 shots this year, which was great if you drafted him, along with he had 40 goals and 47 assists for 87 points in 82 games. This is probably Nylander's ceiling, but I feel like he does have a pretty good floor for being around a point per game with a really high shot volume. I'm not sure where he's going ADP-wise just because things are still super early, but I would look to take him if you can in this year's draft because of his shot volume and because he's probably going to score around 40 goals again this year. Up next is Clayton Keller, guys, and if you know anything about Clayton Keller, he's been a highly touted prospect, so don't look at this new point total with his career high being anything like a fluke. He's the real deal. He is an incredibly talented player. He had 86 points in 82 games last season with 37 goals, 49 assists, and 223 shots. I have him behind Nylander for that reason, especially because he's kind of lower on the end of in terms of shot volume. Like he's kind of sits around that 220 range when he's playing a full season. And I think that 37 goals is probably something that like we could see again. I think anywhere around that 35 mark and around that point per game mark is good for Keller. He's a really good option. Don't let him being on Arizona scare you away. They have a lot of talent coming up with guys like Logan Cooley this season and Dylan Guenther. Keller was in a really good spot on his line last year. And just I expect the same thing again. Hover around a point per game. It gets you like 200, 210, 220 shots. Up next, guys, I have Andrei Svechnikov of the Carolina Hurricanes. He was actually a pretty tough one to kind of rate. He hasn't really had a season with over 70 points just yet, even though we've seen some high goal totals, like around the 30 goal mark, not last season, but the year before. Worst thing happens, he gets an MCL sprain. We don't know if he's going to be ready for game 1. I could see him jumping up in the tier list if he can play a full season and actually hit that kind of close to point per game potential. He's got a good shot volume too, guys, depending on how many games he plays. That's really the biggest concern for me. And I was pretty conservative with this rating as well too. I do love the fact that he hits a bunch as well too. 140 hits the season before in 64 games. In 78 games, he had 189 hits. An ideal season would be a really high shot volume, and he plays a full season. He's healthy. He's fine. The MCL sprain doesn't really affect him as much, and he gets, again, another 200 hits for you guys. That would be ideal, but for right now, I'm keeping him in B tier. Up next, guys, is Kyle Connor, still in the B tier. The only reason why I don't have him above Svechnikov is because he doesn't really hit as much as Svech. Even though Svech is a little bit risky, Kyle Connor, on the other hand, has a very, very high floor. He's played 79 and 82 games in the past 2 seasons. He had 93 points the year before and 80 this year. I expect another really high, like point per game season from this guy with a really high shot volume. The season before, he had 317 shots. Last season, it kind of dipped a little bit with 273. The one thing I am worried about, however, is that if Winnipeg does end up shipping players out who is this guy going to play with, especially if they move out a guy like Scheifele, for example. I'm just a little bit hesitant to see what happens with the Jets, but Kyle Connor typically has a really high floor, and I like him in the B tier. Rounding out our B tier list, guys, we have Johnny Gaudreau of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He did have a 40 goals this season before last year in 21-22 in Calgary. However, you got to remember that was the first time he's eclipsed the 36 goal mark in his entire career. Last year, he only had 21. He's an elite playmaker, and he plays like that. He actually has a decent shot volume as well, too, guys. Out of everybody in the B tier, he has the highest ceiling, and I expect him to potentially jump to A tier. I'm expecting anywhere between that 85 point a game mark to even potentially in the 90-point range, guys. I'm just a little bit hesitant because he hasn't quite figured it out, and he doesn't really have a number one center to play with in Columbus. Fingers crossed, that's Adam Fantilli. I have Alex DeBrincat of the Detroit Red Wings. I couldn't find an updated jersey with him as well, too. So just bear with me on that, guys. But he is on Detroit now. And I know after coming off of a really underwhelming season in Ottawa with only 66 points in he played a full 82 games. He's very safe as well, too, when it comes to his games totals, guys. I really like him a lot also because he'll get you over 100 hits usually as well, too. And I believe that he still has 35-plus goal upside in him. He could hover around the 40-goal mark depending on how things go with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond, who's another guy we're kind of high on this year. The reason why I'm putting him in the C tier is because he hasn't shown it yet outside of Chicago. So that's something, again, you need to keep in mind when you're drafting this guy. Really like him for his goal upside this year. Fingers crossed he figures it out in Detroit. Up next, guys, I have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins of the Edmonton Oilers. His career totals tell me that last year was an outlier. You've got a guy that's never scored over 70 points that just magically hits over 104, and that's honestly probably to do with the McDavid effect. The other thing is he scored 37 goals, and his past 3 years, his goal totals have been 11, 16, and 22. His shooting percentage was triple what it was the year before. That tells me he's due for a regression, as well as, guys, he doesn't really shoot the puck a lot. The big advocate to drafting Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on your team is the power play. He's an absolute stud on the power play, guys. Doesn't really hit as well, too. I think he's due for another round of point-a-game season, but I'm hesitant about two things. Number one, the goal scoring, and number two, him staying healthy. I'm letting somebody else draft him. Up next, guys, is Jake Guentzel of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He played 78 games last year. He had 36 goals and 73 points. The first time he kind of dipped below a point per game over the past 4 seasons. So I expect that to change. I really like his shot volume as well, too, guys. Anywhere within that 240, 250 range. The big upside of the Guentzel is he does have 40 goal potential. 36 goals last season, and the season before 40 goals in 76 games. He does hit quite a bit as well, too. He should get you around 80 hits if he plays a full year. So that's a good advocate as well. The reason I have him below Nuge is the fact that, he dipped below a point per game last season, and Nuge really kind of established himself as being over a point per game player, even though it was 100 points, and I don't think it'll be quite 100 points last season. I like Guentzel as a really safe option here. I might even take him over a guy like Nuge, depending on where we are in the draft. Finally, guys, our last winger is Kevin Fiala of the LA Kings. I like Fiala a lot, too. He's usually over a point a game. The one thing that kind of scared me based off of last year was his goal total really dipped. He had only 23 goals last year. Should get you around 250 shots, 260 shots, and hopefully he plays more minutes in LA after being under 18 minutes again last season with the LA Kings. That's going to do for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I think out of everything in the tier list, the things I'm going to get the most gripe about is having Kucherov in A after coming off a 113-point season, and I think you could make an argument for taking Timo Meier or Ovechkin over Marner. Other than that, I feel like it's a pretty good list. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you would change, where you would have certain players, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.